Hey guys, I just wanted to take a moment and share a couple thoughts on hope in the midst of difficult circumstances. One of my favorite Psalms is Psalm 18. It's a psalm that some of you may know, has this beautiful descriptive language of God coming to the rescue of David. These amazing words like, David called out to God and God comes down and the earth shook and quaked and the foundations of the mountains trembled. And the smoke rose up from his nostrils and consuming fire from his mouth. He bent the heavens and he came down, total darkness beneath his feet. He rode on a cherub and flew, soaring on the wings of the wind. From the radiance of his presence, his clouds swept onward with hail and blazing coals. The Lord thundered from heaven, and the Most High made his voice heard. He shot arrows and scattered them, and he hurled lightning bolts and routed them. Like, it goes on to describe this amazing picture of like this epic salvation. Like, and it makes you think, man, that's so amazing. The God of the Bible shakes the heavens to come down to rescue one of his children, one of his people who called to him for salvation. But one thing that we may, I think, overlook in this psalm is the verses right before that. It's the situation that was surrounding David as he calls out to God. And the way he describes that situation is almost hopeless and totally kind of hopeless. Verse 4, he says, "The ropes of death were wrapped around me, and the torrents of destruction terrified me. The ropes of Sheol entangled me, and the snares of death confronted me. And I called out in my distress to the Lord." So David describes that his situation was totally hopeless. He wasn't just anticipating a difficulty and then saying, "God, please help me. Like, please help me avoid this stuff, these difficult things." David was surrounded by death and darkness, and there was no way out. And he calls out to God in the midst of that. And out of that comes this epic story of redemption, of salvation, of like this almost over the top response of God, of power to deliver his child out of a difficulty. I think oftentimes when we talk about God saving or protecting, guiding us in our lives, we imagine it being that he helps us avoid difficult circumstances. And when we get into really complicated stuff, when we get into dark places, we think that God has abandoned us. We think that God has forgotten his promises. We think that we're all alone. But that is not the case with the story of the Bible, and that is not the case with David here. God is working, as some of you heard me say before, God is working victory through situations that look like defeat. And that's kind of one of the themes of the Bible, one of the main themes of the Bible. God works in the most powerful ways through situations that we thought were totally hopeless. And it gives a partial answer to why does God let difficult things happen to us. But as those who hope in God, we cannot expect him to help us avoid difficulty and be that the indicator of whether or not God is with us and God is protecting us, because that is not what happens in the story of history. And some of the most difficult situations that God has permitted his people to get into have been the most beautiful and powerful displays of his grace, mercy, and redemption. It makes me think of that scene in Lord of the Rings where Gandalf tells the soldiers at dawn to look to the east, and they're in Helm's Deep. They're all holed up in this castle fortress in the cliffs, and there's no way out. They're surrounded. The enemies have broken through, and they're all about to die. And so these guys just charge, right into the fray, right into the enemies. There's no hope for them to be victorious. And at the very last, at the nick of time, they look, to the east, and Gandalf comes charging with the whole army. When we think about the story of Scripture, when we think about Jesus on the cross, the darkest moment in history, and that becoming the most powerful story of deliverance and salvation and the faithfulness of God, we have to just remember that. We have to learn that God is not giving you perfect little answers, of why bad things happen. Sometimes we don't know. But one thing we know for sure, God is working in the midst of that stuff. God is working through your difficult trials and he desires for you to call out to him, to hope in him, to put your confidence in him, no matter how difficult, no matter how pointless or dark or hopeless your situation is. God desires to bring deliverance in the midst of very difficult situations. He desires to hear for you, to call out to him. He delights to save his saints in the midst of difficulty. He's never abandoning us. And he wants us to learn to fight. He wants us to learn to develop courage. He wants us to learn to feel the presence of danger and to stand firm in the promises of our God and expect that he is coming. Hope that's helpful, encouraging. Let me know what you guys think.